Welcome to the Nonprofit Digital Success Podcast, brought to you by wowdigital.com, your best place for nonprofit websites and design, now including fractional CMO support.
Feeling like every campaign at your nonprofit is last minute, rushed, and exhausting? Alexis Bennett shares how small teams can escape scramble mode, build rerunnable campaigns, and finally turn strategy into sustainable growth. So stay tuned and let's transform the way that you plan and execute your digital campaigns. Welcome to the Nonprofit Digital Success Podcast. I'm your host, David, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about moving from scramble mode to strategic, rerunnable, reusable campaigns with Alexis Bennett. Before we continue, I just want to mention that our podcast does need your help. If you find this episode or any of the others insightful, interesting, or at all helpful, please like, subscribe, share, and comment. It really does help our podcast immensely. Alexis Bennett is a messaging strategist and founder of Sprig Co., helping nonprofits and healthcare teams turn complex ideas into clear, high-impact campaigns that drive action and outperform their size. Thank you so much for joining, Alexis. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
Awesome. So let's just jump right in, and here we go. So a lot of nonprofits feel like they're in reactive instead of proactive mode, right? What does scramble mode actually look like in terms of a digital marketing context, across emails, website updates, campaigns, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, first of all, it's easy for organizations to get teams to get into scramble mode because they're doing the work, right? They're taking care of clients, they're taking calls, they're trying to do outreach to donors. They wear a lot of hats, right? And so a lot of the scramble for campaign comes from just being busy and it sneaks up on you. I think we've all experienced it, even in our personal lives. We have professional things going on and then it's like, oh shoot, summer break coming. What are we gonna do for the kids kind of thing? So it happens to all of us, right? But scramble mode feels like, oh shoot, we only have a few weeks until this campaign starts and we've done nothing. And for development directors or communications folk, marketing folks, they may be one person or you may have a couple, like one of each of those people, but more often with these small teams, you have one person that's doing all of the admin stuff, right? And I say admin not as in a bookkeeping way, but in the, I'm not directly interfacing maybe with donors or clients, right? Or not with donors or clients, but with oh shoot, we need to pull something together really quickly. It looks like, let's go through all of the stuff that we have and see if we have anything that works, because reaching out to get impact stories takes time, right? You may be reaching out to your team that's in the field. It takes time to make contact with some of those folks. And in some populations, they're really tough to get a hold of, right? So it looks like, okay, what do we have that we haven't used in a couple of years that no one will notice if we use it again? It looks like blasting out emails when you have time and not on a specific cadence. It looks like, oh, we need to start posting to social media, even though we've been ghosting people for the last 3 months. So it really, it comes with sort of scattershot tactics without a real overarching strategy for how we're going to approach a campaign. And when nonprofits, and especially now, in the last year, budget cuts have been a major constraint, we really need those campaigns to run well. We really need to connect with folks. We really need to bring people in to let them know about our organization or fundraise or whatever that is. And so scramble mode costs a lot, in the grand scheme, because you're not as effective as you possibly could be.
I think one of the main themes through everything you just said is actually having a plan and a strategy in place. Anybody that's listening to this episode on whatever podcast platform you're listening to, check us out on YouTube or Spotify, the video version of this, because on the wall behind me, this is not a virtual background. This is a real legitimate background behind me. I have fancy lights turned on, but I have a content planning board on the wall. And this could be used for events. This could be used for your content, your emails, your social, your videos, everything and all of it. And we have a really great process that we go through where we sit down with our clients at the start of the year for an hour and we plan out the entire year of content, not actually write the content and create it, but just these are all the topics. Every organization, I'd say probably over 90%, are tied to some kind of thing. Maybe it's Alzheimer's, maybe it's children, maybe it's this, that, whatever. And through the year, there are different things that you can tie your organization to. Like there's brain health awareness, there's back to school, there's summer programs, there's this, that, whatever it happens to be. And you can take your content, and then like the top half of my board, if anybody wants a copy of this board, let me know. I designed it in a way that you can print it and just put it in an IKEA frame and just like use it. But the top half is split into 12 boxes, one for every month. So you can take your content ideas, throw them in for the month, and then the bottom half is the current month. When are you actually going to do the stuff? When are you going to send it out? When are you going to write it? All that kind of stuff. And having the plan makes it really easy to execute. And you don't really have to think too much. When are we doing this? When are we doing that? Not to say that you can't change what you're doing or when you're doing it, but it's a really great start.
Yeah, I agree. I think of those as sort of like anchors to your year, right? Because you know certain things aren't going to change. The event will probably not change dates dramatically, especially if you have a place rented. Alzheimer's Awareness Month is not going to change. So you can do a lot of that pre-planning. And I love that for the visual folks, like sticky notes work really well. And then if you're dealing with a team and you need to delegate, I've often taken what you've done with sticky notes and moved it over to a project management tool or a spreadsheet even, so that you can keep track of it across teams and not have to wonder what the heck is coming next. It's already planned for you. You just need to go look at your sheet.
Yeah, I mean, you could move it to Trello, to Airtable, to ClickUp, to even just a Word document on a network drive, like whatever it is that works for you. But planning, whiteboarding, doing that stuff in the physical space is very different in the outcome. So when we think about this scramble mode, folks that haven't done the planning, and I think a lot of people don't give enough time and foresight to recognize that the planning is an important thing. But for those folks that are operating in scramble mode, and even if you do this, there is still scramble mode that does happen because you've got like the 37 hats that you're wearing. But how does it impact things like donor retention, website conversions, ROI on campaigns and events and stuff?
Yeah, in terms of thinking about that scramble, and I think this comes up a lot because you're wearing multiple hats. And so there's this tendency to do a lot during a certain period of time and then be crickets in between. And we know what that feels like as consumers, but somehow we sort of disconnect that from the work that we're doing often, And so the big thing is just you're going to people for maybe the first time to communicate something. First, you need to warm them up, right? Scramble mode, you don't have any time for warm up. But then you're asking them to engage in some way, but you haven't done any of that warm up. You haven't maintained that relationship. And so it really feels inauthentic. It feels like you're only there for the transaction. It feels like we're not important. And it feels like you just asked me, but you haven't told me anything about what you've done already with what I've given you, right? Because you haven't spent that time telling them how their funds have had an impact. You haven't told them about the awesome programs that you're running. You haven't told them about the people. You're like, you get it, right? But if you're not constantly like closing the loop, right, for them, and when you come back to re-enter a new loop, it's like, why would I give to you, right? You're only here when you need something. And I don't even know if you're doing anything with the money I've already given you. And so you see retention start to fall off, or you see that amount go down, right? Because they're like, yeah, I still care, but, I'm not as engaged. Alternatively, if you're being very consistent and intentional about your communications all year long, you're going to see that relationship grow, hopefully.
Yeah, and that's part of it, right? Like, how many of us have had a friend that like only calls you when they need something, or they need help, or they need money, or they need help move, or whatever, right? Like, there's only so much you can give. You need to be talking about the impact. You need to be talking about the benefit. Not everything is always an ask, right? You need to emotionally connect with somebody to make them understand the impact that they're having. Part of that is the messaging, right? It's not a, hey, donate $50. It's a help buy school supplies or help feed the homeless, or, right? And tie that to something actually tangible as opposed to this ethereal random pot of money that is just magically going to go and help people.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a reason, those Give Day campaign pages that if you're participating in your city or statewide Give Day, like there's a reason why they have all of those like open fields for you to put, hey, your $5 will do this, right? Borrow that when you're running your own campaign, but there's a reason that that's built in. It wasn't just like, hey, I want a box here with a pretty picture. There's intention. Someone made a decision about that. And so if you don't have anything to put there, then you may ask yourself why you're not doing that in other campaigns and other communications. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And so, one of the things that I think helps people, especially when you do things year over year, like there's Giving Tuesday, that happens year over year, right? Take what you did last year, plan it out in some kind of like master document that you can just like copy, paste, modify a little bit as you need, and then rerun. And you're talking about rerunnable campaigns. So what does that actually mean? And how do you differentiate just repeating what you did the previous year?
Yeah, when I say repeatable campaigns, I don't mean send the same message, right? I mean create structure that you can take some of the mental load off of yourself when you're planning your next campaign, right? You know that Giving Tuesday is going to come every year. And hopefully, you can do this once. It may adjust over time as your audience changes, but you need to be spending some time identifying who your audience is if you don't know them well, right? Whether that's new people or just getting to know the folks that are already in your network. You need to figure out what channels work the most effectively. I'm big on, if you're a small team, you don't need to show up everywhere. You need to show up where it works. And so a lot of that planning needs to go into, do I show up on Instagram or do I show up on Facebook? Do I show up in email or do I show up in printed material that shows up in someone's mailbox, right? A lot of that planning needs to happen. So then when you're creating your campaign structure, it's a matter of, all right, I know who my audience is, where they show up and what they care about. I know how they think. Are they the type of person that needs a story or do they need to see the metric, right? And starting to build some of that logic into your campaign, and then thinking about your channels. Where do I need to show up? And then frequency, I think, is one of those things we often overlook. I talked about warming up your audience already, but different people are going to have different attention spans. I'm a mom. My husband is in the military, so I have lots of time that I spend alone juggling two small humans. And so my attention might require you to send me something like 3 or 4 times before not because I don't care, because I do, but around giving time in November, I have like a stack of mailers sitting on my counter and I'm like, oh, I need to send those, but it takes me a minute, right? Because I just am pulled in so many different directions. Whereas maybe a senior is your primary audience and they have a lot more, time and attention to put into your campaign. So thinking about your touch points, but you can build that into your campaign, looking at your sticky notes stuck there in the background, that lower half where you're putting, when am I actually going to send these things? Moving that over into a project management tool or taking a picture even of what you've got here. And so if that works for you, putting it back on the board. And then the effort every year is really just, what are we fundraising for? What is our campaign about? Are we doing something different this year? And who do we want to talk about, right? Do we have some really cool stories from the year that we can pull in? And a lot of that, when do I send it out? 4 to 6 weeks before. I need to make sure I send an email stuff. You've already thought about that, built that into your plan. And then you're just pulling content in. Anyone can sit down and write, to put some content together in a couple of hours, especially if they have some really good stories. And you don't have to be like workshopping and getting all of these people in the room to think through, who do we need to reach again, right? And so that's what I mean when I say repeatable. Create structure that will make your job easier so that all you're having to do is pull in new content.
And I think you've made a lot of interesting points there. And one of the things that I want to emphasize is you need to know your audience. You need to know who you're talking to. Demographic, geographics, and psychographics. People don't know often what psychographics are, or if they do, they've never actually used it and deployed it and figured out who their audience is. I ask everybody who is listening to this, wait till the episode's done, but go and listen to episode 16, because I have an episode where I talk about psychographics, importance of it, what it is, and how to use it in your organization. And it's really important to, where do they hang out, right? How can you connect with them? What stories resonate with them? And you need to go back and you need to look at your data and your analytics. What emails got the most opens? Which social posts got the most likes, comments, interactions, shares, all that kind of stuff? Which campaigns, at some point you need to put out an ask. Not every email should have an ask. Let me just be very clear about that. But when you do put out an ask, which of those emails generated the most donations coming back in, right? And then you can use that data to create similar messaging, similar posts, similar campaigns over and over and over. Maybe change the topic a little bit, but the way you talk about it, the messaging, the stories that you've included, maybe you've got video, maybe it's just photos, maybe there's nothing at all, right? You need to really clearly understand what's working and what's not working. Build that into the structure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're speaking my love language. I'm just like, yeah, I mean, and going back to scramble mode, it's really difficult to do that if you're tight on time, right? Or you don't have a lot of bandwidth. And so that's why getting out of that scramble, being intentional and thinking ahead is so important, because all of this stuff that we talk about, these best practices, these things that you can do to optimize your campaign requires you to think ahead. Right. And people feel it, you know, that people feel the lack of strategy because it feels like ting, 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 ting of stuff without a clear through line. So even beyond that, like ghost and ask sort of cycle, right? You know, people can feel it.
Just to put a visual in people's minds, right? The scramble mode is kind of like a pinball machine, right? Where you're bouncing back and forth and hitting lots of stuff versus one of those like crazy marble run videos that you might have seen where like it goes through things and like it, right? It's a very different way of getting the ball from point A to B. You need the plan, you need the strategy, you need it sorted out. And although people are really stressed and busy, there are times of year, let's just be totally honest with ourselves, where there really isn't much to do, right? Block off 1 or 2 days in your calendar. Maybe it's with your team, maybe it's by yourself, maybe it's with your favorite AI platform, whatever it happens to be, and sit down and actually put some time and effort to building this out, because it's going to save you pain, time, headache, and effort, campaign after campaign, year after year.
Yeah, and you mentioned planning at the beginning of the year. I like to plan before January starts, because there's always that quiet period. You know, you hustle really hard towards the holiday season, and then there's sort of this like lull, right? Nobody's reaching out, everybody's in and out of the office, on vacation. Your donors are like checked out, right? Because they're doing the same thing with their work. Like, use that time, right? You plan the whole year in that time. But you're right. I mean, there's lulls every even throughout the year. It doesn't have to necessarily be only this time. And it just takes discipline to sit down and do that, right? Instead of like, what's next on the to-do list? Because there's always going to be things.
Yeah, so my pro tip for everybody is like, open up your calendar, think about the past 12 months. When has it been a little bit quieter? Maybe it's around the end of school and like beginning of summer. Maybe it's around the holidays, although a lot of organizations actually close for like a week and a half or 2 weeks. Like, don't use your holiday time. Take that time to recoup and you regenerate. But find some of those times, block off the entire day, like right after this episode. Just go block 1 or 2 days and just be done with it. And don't move those days. Come hell or high water, it doesn't matter. Do not move those days. Actually spend the time. Okay, so let's jump back a little bit here. Websites. In your opinion, Alexis, what role should a website play in rerunnable campaigns, and how should nonprofits structure their site to support strategy instead of, you know, this crazy last minute chaos that happens?
I mean, your site can be a great storytelling tool. I mean, you can talk to a web designer if you want to get to the specific like site maps that take you on a journey, you know, when people land on your site. But for me, what I love about websites is just using them as a storytelling tool, you know, and you think about keeping people's attention all year and keeping that communication alive, you know, making sure that your website is updated with the latest, whether that's an event that they can get in touch with you and celebrate or be a part of, whether that's volunteer opportunities, whether that's story. I'm coming from former magazine editorial team and transitioned over. And so I'm always a big like push the content person, just because I feel like you can take those stories and put them on your site. It's a great way for people to get lost in your site and do some redate. And then you can fold that content over later. Just because it's been published on your site doesn't mean that everybody's read it. So I love to pull the content that's gotten a lot of traction over and reusing some of it for my campaign as well. A story that's really resonated. Maybe you did a lot of work to pull some data in to an article that you're really proud of and you want to bring that forward. The other thing too is that I mentioned give days, right? And they specifically have you build out on their landing page that you can do the same thing for your campaign too. And so having a home for your campaign where all of that information lives, I feel like this is best practice, but not everybody does this, right? So build out a page that's your campaign, make sure you're following the same structure of hierarchy, making sure that it's very skimmable and readable. And then, use pop-ups or use your emails to drive people over to that page so that you can use it as another vehicle. But that's a way to sort of like build your entire campaign story on one page within your own site. I like to mention those give days because I feel like there's a lot of things that you can just borrow, even if you don't participate, like the PR around the event, the hype around the event, the landing pages, being very prescriptive. There's a lot that you can borrow from those, even if you don't participate.
You want to one-up that. I think that's all awesome. Try to work in some A/B testing into those pages as well. I can tell everybody right off the bat, there's been a lot of research around CTAs, call to actions, so buttons that direct people. People don't want to think, they don't want to read, they don't want to write. So you got to keep your content really short, bullet points, very skimmable, but people don't want to think about what the thing is that you want them to do, right? So CTAs, call out buttons that are very clear, very important, the top part of the page through each section, because they might not be ready to donate here or subscribe or share or anything, but maybe further down in the content, once they've gotten some context and they're emotionally engaged, that's the right time. The point that I'm trying to get at is make sure that you've got buttons on the page that direct people what to do. And around the research, you would think like green means go, red means stop, right? Green would outperform. No, red vastly superior in terms of driving people to click the button. So red tones for the call to action buttons, you want to go with those. So just putting that out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's good advice, especially, if that's not on your brand, it can be tempting to let's make this pretty, right? And let's use a nice blue that matches with our dark blue of our logo. I use heat maps a lot too. I don't know if you are a heat map guy, but along with A/B testing of, whatever your site content is, your emails, all of that, you can use your heat map. And even if you're hosting on like a Wix or a Squarespace, there's built-in tools on the back end. You don't have to go pay for another subscription to a heat map service. You can use a lot of that and just watch people's journey through your site, watch people's journey through your landing page. You'll learn a lot about where they're stopping and where they're on or where they're bouncing. And you can start to make adjustments based off of individual journeys or like an aggregate of looking at those journeys and just optimizing your site. So that's great advice.
Yeah, there's two tools that I would recommend. By far, leaps and bounds above the next one is called Hotjar. You can set up a free account. It'll track, I think, 5,000 page interactions with the free one, but only for like 1 or 2 pages. The other one is Microsoft Clarity. I don't like it as much. I don't think it's as good in terms of giving you the data, but that one's also free. You can track the entire site instead of just 1 or 2 pages. So there are some tools out there.
Yeah, I love Hotjar.
To help people. Yeah. All right. So great. We've talked about specific tactics. We've talked about planning. For leaders that might be feeling overwhelmed or too overwhelmed to slow down, block some time, do this kind of planning, what do you see as the first small kind of step that they can take without adding any more stress to themselves?
I think you could probably I'm just thinking about that component of knowing your audience. You likely have people who are on the ground, doing the work, meeting with folks in the community. Listen, right? You can get a lot of information just from putting feelers out through your other folks, whether that's the board members or through your volunteers. Find out where they came from, find out what they're hearing in the community. And while that's not the most data-driven approach, right, at least you're getting some information because you're already having conversations with them, right? And so if you're overwhelmed and you're like, I can't do one more thing, I can't sit here and sift through the data, or I don't know how, or I can't fire someone, whatever that looks like, the one thing that you can do immediately that's low effort is start to ask more questions about your audience to the people who are interfacing with them the most.
Yeah, you need to really connect with them and have those conversations. It's very, very important. Absolutely. Totally agree. In terms of messaging, right? What messaging mistakes would you say keep small nonprofits from outperforming their size online?
Yeah, I met with someone the other day. He was just feeling frustrated about campaigns, and I think the challenge was that they were comparing themselves to like big guys, right? Like Big Brothers, Big Sisters, YMCA's, big national organizations where they not only have maybe a larger team there locally, but they have this whole like brand backing. And so I think I say this because it's really easy to feel like, well, if this organization is doing everything, then I have to do everything too. So messaging specifically, and we talked about like, you don't have to show up on every channel if that's not what's effective for you. But the same can be true in your messaging is you want to do so much that you end up like oversaturating your message, if that makes sense. So instead of focusing on like one program, one need, and I'm just talking about like a fundraising campaign for being pretty focused on one thing. You try to like make sure that everyone knows everything about your entire organization, right? Like we do this and we do this and we do this and we've done this and we've supported this. And it's like, holy cow, if I'm interacting with your message and just like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to be focused on. You mentioned the buttons, and I think this is something that can happen too, is like, give them a bite-sized thing and then ask, give them a bite, right? And you're doing that maybe on your page and then giving them a button, but you can do the same thing in your message. Rather than give them everything, like get really focused on what is the one thing that they need to know about, and then iterate on that, right? Like if I am focused on, like a back to school backpack program or a campaign, and I'm an organization that also like does healthcare screenings, also does, has counseling services, also has a food bank. You don't need to like give them all of that. Just focus on backpack program, what it is, what you need, what it does. Give me some impact metrics. Tell me some stories about some kids that you supported. Tell me about some schools that have used, like have given you good feedback on their interactions with you and the kids that have been supported by you. And so I think that's the big one, is that, instead of focusing on like one thing, you want to share everything because you're in it, you know the work, so it doesn't feel complex. So talking about it doesn't feel too complex. And you want to share all of the good stuff that you're doing, but it's too much for people to consume. So that's the thing that I see most often, is just let's try to do everything at one time.
I would call that watering down the message, right? Like we do all these things. No, talk about that one thing. Your next email that goes out, talk about the next thing. The next email, talk about that thing. I love the idea about being specific with it and making people understand the importance of this thing, not these things, right? And leveraging the story, I think, is really cool. If you're talking about the backpack program, right? I'm just throwing this out there, right? But talking about the backpack program.
We'll roll with it, yeah.
Right? Can you get any stats or data about, like, at the end of the school year, how that helped the kids through the entire school year? I think we can all understand children who might not have the financial means in the family to get the supplies that they need, the importance of getting them good school supplies so they can have a really strong school year and get off on the right foot. But what did that do through the entirety of the school year? Can you, obviously with permission of the family and the parents or the guardian or whoever, follow that student through the school year? Talk about, how this helped with all these other pieces, and really bring a full circle to that campaign. And then that gives you some leverage the next time that campaign comes around, right? And it gives you the data, and it gives you the insight, and it gives you really great stories, and it gives you more wholesome and complete information to pull on those heartstrings of your potential donors.
Yeah, and I don't, you talked in my intro, I work with nonprofits and I work with healthcare groups, and I think there's some interesting things you could do, even just following around a student and talking about, just go a layer deeper, right? It's not just like, here's this confidence, I'm assuming the kid, it's a they, right? Like ungendered student that received the backpack. But if you're following along with a student, dig a little bit deeper than they had a backpack, so they felt confident because now for the first time they had like a Spider-Man backpack, and they've always wanted a Spider-Man backpack. Think about like what now do they have access to that they didn't before because of this backpack. Now they can participate in the food program. They have a place to take food home if they don't, if they're participating in a food program. Now they can take books home, whereas before they weren't able to do that, take books home from the library. Like they know that they have something like a safe place to go back and forth. The reason I mention that is that so many organizations do this work around social determinants of health, right? And like addressing upstream prevention and improving health and wellness. And I think that, it's like an untapped, like true line often. We see it with food. We see it with maybe transportation, like some of the obvious things. If I can't get to, my appointment, then this is a problem. But I wish that more organizations worked into their messaging, like this broader impacts on like community and health and culture just through this like one backpack, right? Because I think that you would appeal to a lot more people, right? If you're not just going after the people that would do it anyway, right? You're going after the people who are like, I see a problem, I don't know how to fix it. And nonprofits offer a great way for people to resolve social challenges, right? And so I wish that more organizations would go just a little bit deeper in their messaging and bring some of that through to the folks who maybe are a little bit more skeptical.
Amazing. Fantastic insight, Alexis. And love the conversation we had around going from scramble, crazy back and forth mode to something more sustainable, more strategic, more aligned in terms of campaign strategies. And I hope everybody listening has been able to get some amazing advice and pointers from you today. I know I've got a few that I'm going to go back and talk to my clients about. What I like to do is to ask my guests to issue a challenge to everybody. So Alexis, within the next, let's say 24 hours of listening to this episode, what do you want people to do?
I mean, you already issued your own challenge to block some time off your calendar. Here's what I want you to do with that time when you get there. I have a resource. We talked a lot about like digging into getting to know your audience. I have a resource, a campaign planning workbook that's going to take you through all of that. So go download that workbook, put that in the link of the time that you don't waste track of it. You're going to block out your time. And I want you to put that document in that, meeting invite so that you have something to come back to. But that's the challenge, is I want you to set yourself up for success, to be thoughtful and to plan not just your campaign, but potentially your entire year. And so that workbook will take you through all of that. It's going to give you a spreadsheet to take all of your notes and put them in something that you can collaborate with others. But I think that's the biggest thing, and that's the hardest thing, is just having the discipline to sit down, block the time, and then use the time. So I'm going to hop on your challenge, David, just to, block out the time and be intentional, and then, set yourself up so that you can be successful and use that time rather than just like, okay, now I need to go back to listen to that episode to know what the heck I was going to do with this time. Put your notes in there, put some tools that'll help you with that planning period, and then make it happen.
Love it. So we will have a link to the workbook from our show notes page. But if anybody just wants to get there and get it right away, how do they get the workbook?
Yeah, that's my website. That's the current pop-up right now. So go over there and it'll smack you in the face. I'd love for people to get that. Obviously, they can follow me on social media or connect with me on LinkedIn, and I can share that with them as well.
Alexis, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's been great having you here on the Nonprofit Digital Success Podcast. Everybody listening, like I just mentioned, come check out our show notes page at nonprofitdigitalsuccess.com. Click on this episode for all of the details. And until next time, keep on being successful.